They say the worst betrayals come from the people you raised. For me, that truth arrived on a Thursday afternoon, in a phone call from a woman I'd never met. I was in my living room, watching the afternoon news with a cup of coffee going cold on the table beside me. The house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. My wife Eleanor had passed 3 years ago, and sometimes the silence still surprised me. My phone rang. Unknown number, Pittsburgh area code, Mr. Walter Brennan. Speaking. This is Janet Miller from Metro Life Insurance. I'm calling regarding your policy. I don't have a policy with Metro Life. A pause. I heard papers shuffling in the background. Sir, according to our records, you're listed as the deceased on a death benefit claim, filed 3 weeks ago. The beneficiary is Brian Brennan, your son. I felt the sofa cushion shift beneath me, like the ground was tilting. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, spilling across the carpet. I didn't move to clean it. I'm sorry. What did you say? Death benefit claim. $750,000. Death certificate, medical records, policy documents, all filed. I'm not dead. Clearly. Her voice was flat, professional. This is now a fraud investigation. I'll need you to answer some questions. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the family photo on my mantel. Brian at his college graduation, me with my arm around him, both of us smiling. Eleanor had taken that picture. She'd been so proud of him that day. $750,000. That was the price my son had put on my life. I spent 32 years in the insurance industry. Started as a claims adjuster in 1975. Worked my way up to regional director before I retired. I knew exactly how this worked. When someone files a fraudulent death claim, the insurance company investigates. They check public records, contact the deceased, verify the death certificate with county records. Most fraud gets caught within weeks. But Brian had done something clever. He'd filed the claim with Metro Life, a company I'd never worked for, a company where no one would recognize my name. He'd probably hoped they wouldn't cross-reference properly. He was wrong. Janet Miller came to my house 2 days later. She was in her 40s, professional, carrying a leather briefcase full of documents. She had the look of someone who'd seen things like this before, but still found them disappointing. Mr. Brennan, thank you for meeting with me. I know this must be difficult. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. Please sit down. She sat at my kitchen table and opened her briefcase. I need you to look at these documents. I have to warn you, some of this will be hard to see. She spread papers across my kitchen table. A death certificate with my name on it. Cause of death, cardiac arrest, date of death. 3 weeks ago, location my home address. A policy application dated several months before that, with my signature forged, obviously. I'd know my own handwriting anywhere. And this wasn't it. He took out a policy on me? Yes. Listed himself as sole beneficiary. The premiums were paid from a joint account. I don't have a joint account with Brian. I haven't had a joint account with anyone since my wife passed. According to the bank records we subpoenaed. You do. Opened about 8 months ago. Your signature is on the account application. She slid another document across the table. A bank signature card with my name on it. My date of birth. My social security number. But not my handwriting. I stared at the documents. Everything needed to prove I existed. And then to prove I didn't. He forged all of this. That's what we're investigating. Mr. Brennan, I have to ask, is there any possibility you authorized any of these documents? Sometimes family members. Miss Miller. I spent 32 years catching people who did exactly this. I investigated hundreds of fraud cases. I testified in court dozens of times. No. I didn't authorize anything. My son forged my signature, declared me dead and tried to collect $750,000. She nodded slowly, made a note in her folder. We're going to need your cooperation, testimony, documentation proving you're alive, witness statements, the works. You'll have whatever you need. There's something else you should know. She hesitated, closing her folder. The death certificate was filed with the county. Officially, as far as the government is concerned, you're dead. You'll need to fix that before it causes problems with your bank accounts, your social security, your property records, everything. I felt something cold settle in my chest. They were talking about me like I wasn't even there, like I'd already been erased. How do I do that? Petition the court. It takes a few weeks usually. You'll need medical records proving you're alive, witness statements, the whole thing. It's bureaucratic, but straightforward. And Brian, if the investigation confirms fraud, and I'm confident it will, we'll refer the case to local law enforcement. Insurance fraud of this amount is a felony. He could face serious time, prison. My son. I thanked her and showed her to the door. Then I sat in my kitchen and stared at the family photo on my refrigerator. Brian at 12, at his Little League game, holding a trophy. Me coaching from the sidelines. Eleanor cheering from the bleachers. I remembered that day so clearly. We'd won the championship. Brian had hit the winning run. Afterward, we'd gone out for ice cream, all three of us, and Brian had asked if he could be a professional baseball player when he grew up. You can be anything you want, I'd told him, as long as you work hard and do the right thing. He'd nodded so seriously, like he was making a promise. Where had that boy gone? I sat in my kitchen until the sun went down, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. How the boy who'd cried when he accidentally broke my reading glasses had become a man who'd declared me dead for money. I didn't have an answer. Maybe I never would. I didn't call Brian. Didn't warn him. 32 years in insurance taught me that you never tip off a suspect. You gather evidence quietly, build your case, and then you strike when they least expect it. I spent the next 2 weeks doing exactly that. I went to my bank first, spoke with the branch manager, a young woman named Carolyn, who'd handled my accounts for years. Mr. Brennan, this is very unusual. She was staring at her computer screen, scrolling through records. According to our system, a joint account was opened in your name about 8 months ago. The co-holder is Brian Brennan. I never opened that account. The signature card is on file. It looks like your signature. It's a forgery. Can you pull the CCTV footage from that day? I want to see who actually opened this account. She blinked. I'd need to check with our security department. Do it. And I want the original signature card, the KYC documents, everything. I spent 32 years investigating insurance fraud. I know what to look for. She printed the documents, gave me copies. The signature card had my name, but not my handwriting. The account had received regular deposits from Brian's personal account, the premium payments for the life insurance policy. I went to the county clerk's office next. The building was downtown, all marble floors and echoing hallways. The clerk behind the counter was an older woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. I need to see a death certificate. I said, my name is Walter Brennan. She typed my name into her computer. Her eyebrows rose. Sir, according to our records, you're deceased. I'm clearly not. She looked up at me, then back at her screen, then back at me. Her face was a mixture of confusion and concern. This is unusual. I imagine it is. I filed the petition to correct the record. The clerk said it would take a few weeks to process. In the meantime, I was officially a dead man walking. I went to my doctor's office. Dr. Patterson had been my physician for 20 years. He examined me, took my blood pressure, checked my heart, drew blood for tests. Walter, you're in excellent health for a man your age. Heart's strong, blood pressure's good, no signs of cardiac issues. You're definitely not dead. I need that in writing. This is the strangest request I've ever had in 30 years of practice. It's the strangest situation I've ever been in. He gave me a letter, signed and notarized, confirming I was alive and in good health. I added it to my growing file of evidence. Then I went home and waited. A week later, I got another call from Janet Miller. Mr. Brennan, we've completed our initial investigation. I wanted to update you before we proceed. Go ahead. The evidence clearly shows fraud. The signature on the policy application doesn't match your verified signature. We had a handwriting expert analyze it. The death certificate was filed using forged medical records. Your son also forged documents to add himself to your bank account. It's comprehensive, Mr. Brennan. He planned this carefully. What happens now? We've denied the claim and referred the case to the district attorney. They're preparing charges. When will Brian be arrested? That's up to law enforcement. They'll want to build an airtight case first. But Mr. Brennan, there's something else you should know. Something that came up in our investigation. Her voice had changed, softer, more hesitant. What, your daughter-in-law was involved, Karen Brennan. She signed witness statements on the bank application, filled out sections of the insurance forms, submitted supporting documents. Her handwriting is all over this. She's also being charged, Karen. I'd always liked Karen. She'd married Brian 8 years ago, given me 2 grandchildren. She came to Sunday dinners, brought me birthday cards, called me Dad. She'd held my hand at Eleanor's funeral. I never thought she knew this much. I thought Brian had kept her in the dark, used her signature here and there without explaining. But all over this, she knew. She had to know, and now she was facing felony charges. I didn't know, I said quietly. I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan. I know this must be difficult. Difficult. I almost laughed. Miss Miller, my son declared me dead for money. My daughter-in-law helped him. I have 2 grandchildren who don't know any of this. Difficult is a very mild word for what this is. She was quiet for a moment. Is there anything else I can do for you? Just keep me informed, please. After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time. The afternoon light faded. The house got dark. I didn't turn on the lights. My son had declared me dead. My daughter-in-law had helped him. Would you let them destroy your reputation, or your family? I had 2 grandchildren. Emma was 6. Tyler was 4. They didn't know any of this. They thought Grandpa was just Grandpa. They came to visit on weekends. Played in my backyard. Ate cookies I baked for them. Emma called me Grandpa Bear, because I'd given her a teddy bear when she was born. Tyler always wanted me to push him on the swing. What was I supposed to do? I decided to visit them, one last time, before everything fell apart. I drove to Brian's house the next afternoon. A big colonial in the suburbs. White columns, manicured lawn. The house I'd helped him with the down payment on. The house where my son had planned my murder, on paper, at least. Karen answered the door. She smiled when she saw me, but something flickered behind her eyes. Fear, guilt. Walter, what a surprise. Brian's not home. I know, I came to see the kids. She hesitated just for a second, then stepped aside. Of course. They're in the backyard. I walked through the house I'd helped furnish, past the dining table where we'd had countless Sunday dinners, past the photos on the wall, our family smiling, happy, lies, all of it. Emma and Tyler were playing on the swing set. When they saw me, their faces lit up. Grandpa Bear. Emma ran to me and threw her arms around my waist. Tyler followed, grabbing my leg. I knelt down and hugged them both, breathing in the smell of grass and childhood. Hey, you two. I missed you. Mommy said you were resting, Emma said, looking up at me with worried eyes. She said we'd see you after the holidays. I looked at Karen in the doorway. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm fine, sweetheart. See, I flexed my arms like a strong man. Strong as an ox. Emma giggled. Tyler tried to flex too, his little arms straining. We played for an hour. I pushed them on the swings, helped Tyler catch a butterfly, listened to Emma explain her entire first-grade class in exhaustive detail. Normal grandpa stuff. The kind of afternoon I'd taken for granted. When it was time to go, Emma hugged me again. Will you come back soon, Grandpa Bear? I looked at her innocent eyes, her sticky fingers, her missing front tooth, and felt my heart crack. I'll always be here for you, sweetheart. Always. No matter what happens. She nodded, satisfied. Tyler waved from the swing set. Karen stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. I walked past her without a word. Walter, she said quietly. I can explain. No, you can't. I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror I could see Emma waving until I turned the corner. That was the last normal day I would ever have with my grandchildren. 2 days later, I got a piece of mail that changed everything. It was an invitation. Gold-embossed cardstock, elegant script. You are cordially invited to the annual Harper and Associates Executive Dinner, honoring our top performers of the year. Guest of honor: Brian Brennan, Vice President of Sales. Date: Saturday evening. Location: the Grand Ballroom, Riverside Hotel. Black tie optional. I stared at the invitation for a long time. Brian was being honored. A company dinner, probably 200 people, celebrating his success. His colleagues, his clients, his bosses, all gathered to applaud his achievements. He was about to be promoted, while I was legally dead. The invitation had come from the company directly, probably from an old mailing list, a database that hadn't been updated. The label was addressed to the Brennan family. Brian didn't know I'd received this. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the invitation, and an idea began to form. A terrible, beautiful, perfect idea. He thought I was dead. The insurance company knew I wasn't, but Brian didn't know they knew. The county records said I was dead. To the rest of the world, I was a ghost. What if I showed up? I called Janet Miller the next morning. "I want to do something," I said. "Something that might help your investigation. And I need to know if it's a problem." "What did you have in mind?" "Brian's company is honoring him at a dinner. Awards ceremony, speeches, the whole thing. 200 people, executives, clients. He thinks I'm dead. He doesn't know the investigation is happening. Mr. Brennan, I want to show up." Silence on the line. "That's unorthodox. It would be proof, public proof that he filed a fraudulent claim. 200 witnesses, photos, video, probably. Everything the prosecution could want. It could also be dangerous. Confronting someone in public, someone who's already shown he's willing to commit serious crimes. I'm 69 years old, Miss Miller. I've confronted plenty of people in my career. Con artists, fraudsters, people who lied to my face and thought they'd get away with it. I know how to handle myself." She was quiet for a long moment. "I can't officially endorse this, but if you happen to attend a public event, and witnesses happen to see a confrontation, understood. Be careful. Call me when it's done." I spent the next week preparing. I got my best suit cleaned. The charcoal gray, the one I'd worn to my retirement dinner. The one Eleanor always said made me look distinguished. I got a haircut. I polished my shoes. I practiced what I would say, in front of the bathroom mirror. Over and over, until the words felt natural. "Hello, Brian. You seem surprised to see me." I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my old colleagues, not anyone. This was between me and Brian. This was personal. The night of the dinner I drove to the Riverside Hotel. It was a beautiful old building, all stone and columns and brass fixtures. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas. Through the ballroom windows, I could see chandeliers, white tablecloths, people in formal wear. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked old, tired, but my eyes were clear, and my hands were steady. Time to remind my son that dead men don't stay buried. I walked to the entrance. A young woman stood at a podium with a guest list, wearing a professional smile. "Name, sir, Walter Brennan." She scanned the list, her finger running down the names. "I'm sorry, I don't see." "Oh, you must be on the family mailing list." The invite was addressed to the Brennan family. "Our database hasn't been updated in a while. Are you related to Brian Brennan?" "I'm his father." Her face lit up. "Oh, wonderful. He's going to be so happy to see you. Go right in, sir." I thanked her and walked into the ballroom. He was going to be something, all right. But happy wasn't the word. The room was exactly what I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens, a stage at the far end with a podium and a banner. Harper and Associates. Excellence in service. I scanned the crowd. 200 people, maybe more. Men in suits, women in gowns, waiters carrying silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. And there, at the head table, was Brian. He looked good, 42 years old, fit, confident. His hair was graying at the temples, like mine had at his age. He wore a navy suit, a red tie, pocket square. He looked like a man who had everything figured out. Karen sat beside him in a green dress, smiling, laughing at something someone said. She touched Brian's arm affectionately, leaned in to whisper something. They looked like the perfect couple. They looked like they didn't have a care in the world. I found an empty seat at a table near the back. The people around me smiled politely, introduced themselves, executives, clients, spouses. I told them I was a guest of Brian's. They seemed impressed. Brian's doing so well, a woman said. She was in her 50s, wearing pearls. This promotion is huge for him. Promotion? Didn't you hear? He's being named senior vice president tonight. Youngest in company history. It's quite an achievement. Yes, I said, quite an achievement. I nodded and said nothing more. The dinner proceeded. Salad, then steak, then dessert. I ate without tasting anything. I watched Brian at the head table, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, posing for photos. He never looked my way. Why would he? I was dead. Finally, the company president stood at the podium, a silver-haired man in his 60s. Distinguished, confident, Richard Harper himself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce tonight's guest of honor. In just 5 years, he's risen from account manager to our top sales performer. His client retention rate is 94%. His revenue generation is unprecedented in our company's history. Please welcome, Brian Brennan. Applause. Standing ovation. Brian walked to the stage, smiling, waving, shaking Harper's hand. He took the podium. Thank you so much. This is incredible. I'm so honored to be here tonight, surrounded by colleagues and friends who've supported me every step of the way. He looked out at the crowd. His eyes swept across the room from table to table, acknowledging the applause, and then he saw me. I've never seen a face change so fast. 1 second he was smiling, confident, basking in applause. The next, his face went white. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands gripped the podium like he might fall. I didn't move. I just sat there looking at him. Calm, patient, alive. The room was still applauding. People hadn't noticed anything wrong yet, but Brian was frozen, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, because he had. The applause faded. People started to notice Brian wasn't speaking. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed. A glass clinked. Brian's lips moved, but no sound came out. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. The room went quiet. 200 people turned to look at me. Hello, Brian. My voice carried across the ballroom. Clear, steady, calm. The voice of a man who'd spent 30 years in boardrooms and courtrooms. Brian gripped the podium. Dad, you seem surprised to see me. I thought you might be, considering you filed a death certificate 3 weeks ago. Gasps, murmurs. People looked at each other, confused, alarmed. What are you talking about? $750,000. That's how much you tried to collect from Metro Life Insurance. For my death, I paused, letting the words sink in. Except I'm not dead, Brian. I'm standing right here. In the flesh, very much alive. The room exploded into whispers. Richard Harper stepped forward, looking between me and Brian, his face a mixture of shock and anger. What is this? What's going on? My name is Walter Brennan. I'm Brian's father. And 3 weeks ago, my son filed a fraudulent insurance claim, declaring me dead so he could collect the benefit. He forged my signature, created a fake death certificate, opened a bank account in my name without my knowledge. All for money. Brian's face had gone from white to red. That's not true. Dad, what are you doing? Why are you saying these things? I have the documents, Brian. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. It's all here. The forged death certificate. The forged signature on the policy application. The fake bank account. The premium payments from your personal account to Metro Life. The company president took the folder. He opened it, scanned the pages, his face growing darker with each document. Is this real? Call Metro Life. Ask for Janet Miller in their fraud investigation unit. She'll confirm everything. Brian stepped back from the podium. I can explain. Can you? I looked at him. My son. The boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, coached through Little League, paid for college, helped with the down payment on his house. Can you explain why you declared your own father dead? The room was silent. 200 people, frozen, watching the most spectacular career implosion they'd ever witnessed. Brian's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Karen stood up from the head table. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. The green dress that had looked so elegant now seemed to hang on her like a shroud. Walter, please. You helped him, Karen. You signed the witness statements. You filled out sections of the insurance forms. You submitted supporting documents. For the father-in-law who held your hand at your mother-in-law's funeral. She sat back down. Tears were streaming down her face now. The company president, Richard Harper, looked at Brian with undisguised disgust. Mr. Brennan, I think you need to leave now. Brian looked around the room. Every face was staring at him. His colleagues, his clients, the people who'd applauded him minutes ago. Now they looked at him like he was a stranger, a monster. I didn't mean it wasn't supposed to. Security, Harper said. 2 men in suits appeared from the back of the room. They walked to the stage, took Brian by the arms. He didn't resist. He just looked at me. His face crumpled, broken, tears running down his cheeks. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate. We got a notice of default on the house. There was a tax lien. Everything was falling apart. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me for help. You could have told me the truth. I was ashamed. And now, he didn't answer. He couldn't. They led him out of the ballroom. The doors closed behind him, with a sound like a coffin lid. I stood there, in the middle of 200 silent people, and felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt everything. Grief, rage, sadness, relief. A lifetime of emotions compressed into a single moment. But most of all, I felt empty. I found a quiet corner of the lobby, and called Janet Miller. It's done, he saw me. Stay there. Police en route. 40 minutes later. The first officers walked into the lobby. Harper's security had already locked the side doors. The dinner had dissolved into chaos. Guests leaving, whispering, phones out. I gave my statement, showed the documents. The detective listened, took notes, shook my hand. For what it's worth, Mr. Brennan, I'm sorry. This kind of case, never easy. No, it's not. Brian was arrested that night. Karen the following morning, while Emma and Tyler watched from the window. My sister Margaret took the children. She'd always been the responsible one, the stable one. She'd raised 3 kids of her own, and now she was raising 2 more. Walter, I don't know what to say. She told me over the phone. Brian was always but, I never thought he'd do something like this. Neither did I. What do I tell Emma and Tyler? Tell them their parents made mistakes. Tell them it's not their fault. Tell them Grandpa loves them. Will you come see them? Every weekend. For as long as they'll have me. The charges were serious. Insurance fraud, forgery, identity theft, filing a false death certificate, conspiracy. The court wasn't going to go easy. I sat in my living room the night after the arrests, watching the news. Brian's mugshot was on every channel. Local executive arrested for insurance fraud. Son declared father dead to collect $750,000. The story had gone viral. I turned off the TV and sat in the dark. I sat in Richard Harper's office. As he read through the documents, he looked up at me, shaking his head. Mr. Brennan, I don't know what to say. Brian has been with us for 5 years. I thought I knew him. So did I. If there's anything we can do, just make sure your other employees know what happened. Make sure they understand that this kind of thing has consequences. He nodded slowly. Why did he do it? Do you know? I'd been asking myself that question for weeks. The answer, when I finally pieced it together, was simple and sad. Debt. His lifestyle was bigger than his income. The house, the cars, the private school for the kids. He was drowning. And he thought this was a way out, by killing his own father. On paper, I mean. Greed makes people stupid. Harper closed the folder. What happens to your grandchildren? My sister will take them, until Karen's trial at least. And after that, I don't know. I suppose we'll figure it out. He walked me to the door. Mr. Brennan, I've been in business for 30 years. I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like what you did tonight. What do you mean? Showing up here, confronting him in front of everyone. Most people would have just let the police handle it. I wanted him to see my face. I wanted him to know that I knew. Harper shook my hand. You're a brave man, Mr. Brennan. No, I'm just a father who finally saw his son clearly. The trial was months later. I attended every day, sat in the back of the courtroom, watching my son and daughter-in-law face justice. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. The forged signatures, the fake death certificate, the bank account, the insurance claim, document after document, witness after witness. Janet Miller testified. So did Dr. Patterson. The bank manager, Carolyn, the county clerk. A parade of people Brian had fooled, used, or ignored. Brian's lawyer tried to paint a picture of a desperate man, overwhelmed by debt, not thinking clearly. He talked about the pressure of maintaining a lifestyle, the fear of failure, the shame of admitting he couldn't provide for his family. It didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. On the last day before sentencing, Brian was allowed to make a statement. He stood at the podium, the same confident posture he'd had at the company dinner, now broken and hollow, and faced the judge. Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt people. I hurt my father, who did nothing but love and support me my entire life. I hurt my wife, who trusted me to take care of our family. I hurt my children, who will grow up without their parents. He looked at me. I didn't look away. Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Because I finally understand what I did. I tried to erase you, the man who taught me everything, who never gave up on me, who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. And for that I'll never forgive myself. He wiped his eyes. I know sorry isn't enough. It'll never be enough. But it's all I have. The judge sentenced him. Brian took a plea. Karen got a reduced sentence for cooperation. After the sentencing, Brian was led away in handcuffs. He looked back at me one last time. I nodded. Just once. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not ever, but it was acknowledgement. He was still my son. I wrote him a letter that night. Brian, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you want to hear from me. But I needed to say some things. I raised you. I taught you right from wrong. I paid for your education, helped you start your career, supported you when things got hard. I did everything a father is supposed to do, and you declared me dead. Not because you hated me, not because I'd wronged you, but because you wanted money, because you saw me as a resource to be exploited, not a person to be loved. That's what hurts most. Not the fraud, not the lies, not even the prison sentence. It's knowing that to you I was worth more dead than alive. I don't know if I can forgive you. Maybe someday, maybe never. But I want you to know that despite everything, I still love you. You're still my son. I just don't know who you are anymore. Dad, I mailed the letter and waited. 3 weeks later a response came. Short, handwritten, on prison stationery. Dad, I read your letter every day. I don't deserve your love, but I'm grateful for it. I made a choice, the wrong choice, and now I'm paying for it. I hope someday I can become someone you'd be proud of again. Brian, I put the letter in my desk drawer, next to Eleanor's wedding ring. Maybe forgiveness was possible. Maybe. A year has passed since that dinner. Brian is serving his time. Karen is in a different facility. My grandchildren live with my sister now. I see them on weekends, take them to the park, bake cookies with them. They don't know the full story. They're too young, but they know their parents made bad choices and have to be away for a while. Someday I'll tell them the truth. When they're old enough to understand. I sold my house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. Bought a smaller place near the lake, where I can fish and watch the sun rise, and not think about what happened. Sometimes I wonder what I could have done differently. Were there signs I missed? Moments when I could have intervened, steered Brian away from the path he chose. Red flags I ignored, because I didn't want to see them, maybe. Probably. But in the end, we all make our own choices. Brian made his. Karen made hers. They chose money over family, greed over loyalty. I chose truth. People ask me if I regret confronting him publicly. If I should have handled it quietly, privately, kept the family shame hidden behind closed doors. I don't regret it. Brian needed to face consequences. Not just legal consequences, but social ones. He needed to stand in front of his peers, his colleagues, the people who'd admired him, and be exposed for what he'd done. He needed to understand that actions have weight, that fraud isn't a victimless crime, that you can't erase someone and expect no one to notice. I was the victim. I had the right to face him. I had the right to be seen. Some people think revenge is about anger, about hurting someone who hurt you, making them feel the pain they caused. I learned it's about truth. It's about standing in a ballroom full of strangers and saying, "This is what happened. This is what he did. This is who I am." It's about refusing to be erased. My son didn't just file a claim. He tried to erase my name. He thought he could cash in on my life, collect a check, and move on like I'd never existed. I didn't ruin his life. I stopped him from selling mine. I showed up at his celebration and reminded everyone, that I'm still here. That's not revenge. That's justice. Would you have shown up, or stayed silent? If stories like this matter to you, there are more waiting on this channel.